Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our first podcast episode in English. We're really pumped about this, and we've been talking for the last hour about, what we're going to talk about today, as well as trying to iron out some technical difficulties. So bear with us as we try this new platform. We're recording on Discord, and today joined with us are obviously our two regulars, Jonas. And as a guest, speaker today, he's not just going to do a monologue, no worries, is actually my brother. So I'm really pumped to have you here. Welcome, Lukas.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for having me. I feel like a VIP.
You are a VIP. You're the first, this is the premiere of not only the English podcast, but the first guest that we are having on this show. So we're really excited.
It's going to be a legacy.
In 15 years, when they do a look back into the past, you will be featured on there.
Exactly.
I hope so.
When we're all rich and famous.
And I'm still poor.
Well, Lukas, give us maybe a little bit about what phase in life you're in at the moment.
Oh, I think that's a good question, actually. So
starting
at the moment,
deep.
How far? So I got married in August of last year. So that was very, very different. First time, and hopefully the last time. Then I moved here to the Netherlands, studying international economics as a master's at the Erasmus University in Rotterdam. Trying to keep my job or trying to have a contract extended, and trying to take one day at a time. I actually have a little poster up there that says step by step, day by day. So yeah.
Fantastic, thank you. And your wife's from the Netherlands. I mean, I know this obviously, but
I guess you're his brother.
Yeah. You were at my wedding, I think. You're the only board person
that's
there.
True.
So, she's from the Netherlands, born and raised, but she speaks fluent English. The whole family does. Almost the whole nation does, and they speak very, very well. So, she's a little younger than I am. I'm 27 and she's 21. So, bagged myself a good one.
Got lucky.
Yeah,
so now today, so this means that Roem is not alone.
True.
It's equal numbers. 2 singles, 2 married.
Do you know, Marcus, it gives us hope. Both of them married pretty young women, and they're all the same age as we are.
That's what I was just about to say. I'm 1 year older than Lukas. I'm 29. You were 28, right?
27.
Oh, 27. Okay, I guess I'm 2 years older. But I guess my wife is also quite young, 21.
But 21, okay, yeah. Do you know what? I'm just waiting for Jonas to come in 3 years and she's 19.
But I guess what would hold you back, Jonas, from taking that decision?
Yeah, we're talking about decisions, right? I guess human decency. No.
Integrity, right? Yeah.
So, ethical
if the lid fits the pot, I mean, there are worse thing in life than having a young wife, right?
That's true. And I guess the other way, I mean, because this is one thing that I'm currently debating, because Jonas, you can say if you can identify with this sentiment or not, but when you get to 29 and this year I turn 30, you start to evaluate and reevaluate your kind of criteria, the kind of age range that you're looking into. And for me, I used to only really want to date somebody who is younger than me or the same age, but now I'm kind of, I'm 30. I've got to the point in life where I'm doing okay for myself financially. I'm still a student, but I'm okay. Even taking into account somebody who's older than me. But obviously with that comes different challenges, different, pressures in life. So I don't know. Have you got to that point yet, Jonas?
So I wouldn't say re-evaluating because I haven't been swimming in the dating pool for too long, to be honest. So I'm actually just at the point to figuring out what people I actually like and what's kind of like my type, you know. So age has never been really that much of a criteria for me. Like when I was 17, I was dating someone who was like 26, I think. And
well,
so things happen, right? So I don't remember;
happen.
it's so long ago. But you know, age is obviously. So at least for me, like the older you get, the more acceptable it is to marry older people because you just don't change after a certain point in your life, right? Because there's not so many big decisions you have to take, like what I'm going to study, how I'm going to make my life happen. So I think like at one point, like late 20s and mid 30s is not a big difference from a character perspective, I think.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, and in line with our topic tonight is making decisions, and I think one of the decisions obviously is the partners that you choose. Now, obviously, we're all of the same faith, and so we kind of have the same kind of way of thinking about the world and how we see it. But I'm sure there's other people out there who have a different base or where they base their decisions off is completely different because of their upbringing, their culture, and maybe a completely different faith. But for us, marriage is kind of like a goal, something that we should aim for. But at the same time, like you don't want to make, like Lucas said, you hope to be married just once. You don't want to remake that decision twice. I mean, it happens. We come from a family where they both got remarried, our parents, and yeah, I'm gonna not say anything about that, but you start to kind of ask yourself, well, what's important to me, and how many people does it take to date to really figure out what do I like, what don't I want in my life, what can I cope with, what can't I cope with, but you also start to learn about yourself, what habits, what traits you do and have that annoy other people.
May I interject into that, Marcus?
Yeah, sure.
Real quick. It's interesting, as you come to understand the older you get and maybe the more you date, like who and what you're looking for in maybe another person. That sounds great, right? Because then you can like narrow it down. But there's also the flip side, which is that becomes a problem because you don't want to settle for anything else, right? And then you have narrowed that pool down rather than saying, okay, I'm imperfect, other people are imperfect, and you make something work. But going back more to the decision part, there are so many things that influence us, right? We make financial decisions, we make educational and career decisions, but we also make love decisions, and there are so many influences in that, from parents to culture to even just language, that make a huge difference, and I think
So
go ahead.
So first of all, Lucas, I think you totally have this podcaster voice. I just have to say that right now because your voice is just so nice and deep and it's just on spot. Just have to say that. And second is, I think right now we're talking about marriage, which is one of the decisions, I guess, we, as Marcus, you said, as we are in our faith and we believe it is, yes, a goal in life to get married. But there's also other decisions or other things we have to make, right? We have to decide, for example, where are you going to study, right? And my question that I just came up by listening is, what is the differences in the process of finding a wife or finding, for example, a job that suits me, right? That is, and what is the reason why we change our jobs, or why some people change their wife? And why do we look at someone who changes their job and say, yeah, that's totally fine. I guess you felt that. And when someone changes his wife, I mean, it might sound very bold saying, no, that's not good, right? I mean, it might sound ridiculous, but...
So I think the main difference is that you're talking about a decision that only affects you, and a decision that affects another person. Probably multiple persons if you have children, right? So we don't need to talk about the damages divorce does to the children. We all know about this. It's clear, right? But even for yourself, like to say like, oh, my wife doesn't fit to me anymore, I just gonna change it. I guess it's very inhumane, right? But on the other hand, if you say I'm gonna change my job, it's like it's fine. It's your life decision. It doesn't influence anyone else. But I see your point. Whereas you can say that in society we have generally the idea of this person doesn't. So with a job, for example, if he just changing his studies or changing his job all the time, he's like he can't make a proper decision, or he can't settle down. Like a way of looking at him as too free thinking, like not reliable, So, for example, if we all know kind of like some people who like already having the fourth for different universities.
Oh, okay. I thought you were talking about a wife.
No, not
But,
wives.
I mean, but I mean, it still happens though. But
yeah,
it's
of
not-
course. But so this all comes back to the values what you're gonna attach to it. So for example, if I switch universities for the fourth time, trying to study something different, especially older people might think this is very you are just too picky. You're not flexible enough. The same with if you date so many people. You see this like in those romantic sitcom movies all the time, right? Then the older people doing the family dinners always say like, oh, you can't just make up your mind and stuff like this, which is kind of understandable. So the question is here, is it bad to be let's say flexible or indecisive? And if so, like you said, what areas does it affect? Because the same goes for marriage. If you're flexible in marriage, it's seen as a bad thing, right? If you just change your wife all the time, it just means you're not committed enough, right? And why it's like you said, why is it different to changing your job? Or should it be different? Is it different?
Well, what I wonder is like if you look at our society at the moment, right? Here in the Netherlands or Germany, where you are at the moment, and you compare it to societies where, it's really a patriarchy, where there are really a lot less things going for females. By that I mean, less empowerment. That it's okay to do that. It's probably more acceptable to maybe not get rid of a wife, but maybe add a wife, and if you think like I'm thinking of maybe like Afghanistan, for example, right, where like females don't have very much empowerment, and they obviously this is my view, I don't have like evidence to back it up, but this is just an idea of like the cultural differences, and maybe that's why that kind of those two decisions are kind of flipped depending on where you go in the world, right?
I think it's depending on where you go and also at what time you're talking about, because it definitely changed. Like from what I can see, marriage or I think even your job maybe might be something that you chose in your early years and then you sticked with it for the rest of your life.
Yeah, if you probably think of your grandparents, right?
Yes, that's what I mean. Like the in the times, like the older generations. But maybe
Like
it's just something that
history.
appeared like it. But I think there's something true to it. And in today's culture, and of course it's different in Afghanistan probably than here. But in today's culture, I guess here in Germany and probably also in the Netherlands, things changed, or like the time the time changed in a way that we like. Oh no, it's more acceptable to change your life and flip everything around.
So I think so. When I think about this, and I wonder why this is, I think mainly this is because, first of all, back in the days, I didn't have any choice. So the same goes with marriage, right? You just pick what was there, right? So if you ask your parents or your grandparents who did they marry, well, they married the person down the street because there was no one else to marry. The same with a job, you just took the apprenticeship that was available in your city or in your village, right? So today we have much harder times making a proper decision. I say proper decision because there's so much variety and so much options, and it's hard to make the right decision. So what I mean with this is, for example, people switching partners without necessarily marrying them, just picking a partner you want to stick with for long term is probably much harder in the times of Tinder, where you just swipe left and right, and you don't have and you just have this variety to choose from. The same with your career. You have so many career options in the Western world, at least, where you can say, I can become a baker, I can become a computer engineer, I can become a policeman, I can become whatever I want to become, and it is my responsibility, my choice now to find out what do I actually want, what is the right decision for me. And I think this is a problem in this decision-making problem, that there's so many variables I have to consider, and then I have to make a choice, and probably later I find out I didn't consider all the options, or I think, well, I can just change my decision because it's not that bad to change it, right? Because there are other options.
There's so many topics that we've mentioned now which I think are really, really interesting, and I think we definitely should explore them. And I think just to kind of maybe recap is what Lukas mentioned about his Afghanistan example. And I was a missionary in South Africa, where I was also in Swaziland, and one experience was really interesting, which is we met a really nice guy, and we went back to his house. He introduced us to his family, and then he introduced us to the rest of his family, and by that I mean his father, who was the chief, and the chief had 7 wives, and they were all different ages, and in total he had 36 children, and he had tons of grandchildren. I mean, they lived on this huge compound. And back then I thought, well, based on my value system, this seems so strange. This seems bizarre. How could you want to have? I mean, I've had one girlfriend. I've had multiple girlfriends in my past, but all in succession. Okay, let me point that out.
You sure about that?
Yeah, I'm sure about that. But the kind of stress that even just having one person in a relationship is hard enough. I couldn't even imagine having 7, that you would have to try and balance it all out somehow. But they do it because they grew up with that value system. And I think a lot of the decisions that career choices, partner choices, whether you get married or not, those are choices that are really kind of heavily influenced by, as I think Ruben said, based on where you come from and the value system in that society. Here in Germany and the Netherlands and most of Europe, we value a monogamous relationship. There are exceptions to this. There are people who don't feel or identify like that, and that's up to them. That's their choice, but the majority of society lives monogamous, and that's because that's where their values are based. But that's the thing. To get to the point where you're in a relationship, I personally find really difficult, and I see this with a lot of young people or our generation. And I talked to my grandfather here in Germany, my opa, exactly what Jonas said, which was, back in the day, you married the girl in the neighborhood because there was no Tinder, there was no other alternatives. It would cost you an arm and a leg, money that you didn't have, the family didn't have, to travel to the next town over, to meet somebody and start a relationship. It was so difficult. So yeah, they had to take what they got given and make it work. Whereas today we're faced with so many options, and I don't want to say opportunities, but options. Whether it be in dating, You know, it's not just that there's one app, Tinder. There's a whole load of applications out there for online dating, and on these applications are all these different options that you can choose from, and it's accessible, it's quick, it's easy. And because it's quick and easy, it's also quick and easy to jump back out of this commitment that you've made, because there's always another option. And so I think for people who, you know, if we apply that now to our careers and studies, we see that if you start a degree and you have the financial means, and I think Lucas is, you know, has some more insights concerning, you know, opportunities and income and so forth with studies, but the kind of concept that we can just jump out of our degree into another degree without having severe consequences makes it so easy. And because it makes it easy, it's now acceptable.
And my question is, like, concerning what you've just said, as well as Jonas, kind of like certain decisions are made out of having the freedom of being able to do so. Would you then say, if we limit the choices that we have, that we may be able to make better decisions? Because obviously you could say, well, if we limit it, then maybe we make worse decisions because the pool of choices we have are just not great. But it just kind of makes me think of like putting ourselves in environments that kind of almost force us to make better decisions. It's like something very difficult right now. I think you spoke about it in one of your podcasts, is obviously the current pandemic, Corona. I sit at my desk, I do school, I do work, I read scriptures, I have like free time when I watch a movie or something, if I have that time, and it's all in one place, right? And now I've lost the point I was going to make.
But I totally want to say something to this, because I read about a study scientists made about the exact point you just made. Is what if you just give people less options? Turns out we might not make the best choice depending on all the variety we have, but we are much happier with the choice we made. So it turns out if you give people less options, people are happier. So now if you tie this into practice, you can totally see this, for example, with Apple. Apple doesn't have so many options if you want to buy an iPhone. You just have the iPhone. Maybe you have a big one and a small one, but it's not a big decision, right? If you go into Android, if you want to buy an Android device, you have a headache because you have hundreds of different Android devices, and you have to figure out what phone you buy. So, for example, if I want to buy a new phone and I'm an Android guy, I have to go to Google, type in what's the best phone in this price range, and I get a list of 20 phones I can pick from, with each have so many different specs I have to consider. It just gives me a headache. Whereas with Apple, I just buy the newest iPhone, right? And I'm probably much happier with this decision because I don't have to worry so much about what, like, you know, the worry and the stress that comes from making a decision is just gone.
And now we could go one step further and add another option and saying, Jonas, your next phone is going to be an Android, and it's going to be this one, right? So that would be on the other extreme, right? Where I guess it could be also to serve society, right? You have a town that needs 10 bakers and a lot of Dönerladen, I don't know, like different facilities that needs to be covered. And someone just goes and says, okay, we need 10 here and 10 there. And we don't need agency, right?
Exactly. This is especially here in East Germany the case before the wall came down. So you had the government which says to the companies, you have to produce this amount of bread. And then if you have time left, you can produce something else. So for example, I saw a documentary on Lebkuchen, so gingerbread, right? So traditional gingerbread factories here, they had a quota before they were allowed to produce gingerbread to produce normal bread for the people. And then they can produce gingerbread, which is considered a luxury good, right? And this way, the government plans for you what you can have and what you don't have. At the same time, yes, you're limiting people. Are they less happy? I saw this very, very funny interview. So it was also a documentary about when the wall came down, and they interviewed people, and then what they think about all this, about all the changes coming in from the West, and they interviewed this old lady, really old lady, and she was just raging about why we need such big supermarkets with 10 different sorts of yogurt, when like why do she literally said, why do I need more options than yogurt and strawberry yogurt? Why do I need 10 different flavors, right? And she was just raging against all this all this like capitalism, right? All these choices is coming into the country, where she says we don't need all of those choices, right? So this is one extreme, obviously. This is one extreme where you say there's only one phone. This is like the communist phone. You can have it. That's it.
Because
Or
it
you have
serves
the other choice of-
its purpose, right?
Yes, but
that's the thing, though, is like, for example, I think for some individuals like this lady who just wants strawberry yogurt, from the day she's born until the day she dies, that's the only thing she'll ever experience. And that's the thing, is like if that's a society that you grew up in, and that is the only choice that you get given, well, it's not even a choice, it's just what you get given, and you don't experience anything else, why should you complain? But that's the thing now, is we live in a society that isn't like that, and it for me, I think sometimes it would be great if somebody just made the decision for me. And like there was this unfortunately I don't know which study this is, but somebody in the comments could probably find it out, is that people who have prearranged marriages tend to actually be happier in their marriage. But now my question is, imagine now I choose, okay, Lukas and Hulm are already married, but let's say, I choose for you and us, his wife, and he has to accept it. Would you be happy with the fact that I'm now choosing for you?
No, do you know why it's not? It's because I know the other options out there. So for example, It's the same with, you have those native people, for example, in the Amazons or whatever. They're just living their life, hunting and eating frogs and wearing like nothing, not to be like, you know what I mean? Like, just living their life and living their happy native life, and everything is good. And then the Western people
doing what they do.
And they say, oh, look, this is a t-shirt. You should wear this. And look, this is an automobile. This is a phone. This is the internet. And those people are all of a sudden becoming unhappy because they see what else is out there. And I think this is the same.
Cost, yeah.
I think this is the same problem here. If Marcus would not choose for me a wife, I would feel he would take away my agency, and he would take away the opportunity to choose something better. But if I would have grown up in a world where it is normal for my parents to choose my partner, then I'm just gonna live with it because it is how it is, right?
So we should not go back in time.
Well, that's the thing, is like, again, if we go back in time, or even if we go to a different culture, that's the values, that's the society that they grow up in, and they don't know any different. And I think it's just so interesting that, on the one hand, I think Lukas and I, we went to the States, I think 2 or 3 years ago, and it was the first time that I'd ever been. I went into their supermarket, I think it was Walmart, and I walked down this one aisle, and I'm used to one aisle being sauces, spaghetti sauces. There might be pesto, there might be, tomato, cream, whatever you want it, and I walked down this one aisle, and on both sides, taller than me, at least 2 meters 50. So there's shelves that you can't even reach, are just tomato sauce, pasta tomato sauces. And I just couldn't believe it, because it wasn't just like 2 meters long, wide, of just one tomato sauce, of one brand, of one flavor. No. It was literally like a rainbow of tomato sauces. But the fact is, the only color that changed was the color of the label. And it gives us the illusion that we have the opportunity to choose. But in fact, from the contents, most of them taste the same.
And it's the same with picking an Android phone. Because in the core, it is the same phone. It doesn't make any difference in your actual daily use. So it doesn't matter if I have 100 different Android phones with 100 different processors. They all work the same. they're all gonna make the same, like they're all, it's the same tool at the end of the day, right? I can browse Chrome,
Same
I
person,
can
yeah.
play games, I can call people. That's a phone. Like there's not much difference, right? And we're starting to make our own life more difficult by trying to get the best option, even though it doesn't make any difference in the end, right?
Mm. Ruhm, I think I cut you off. Did you want to say something? Sorry.
No. I was just trying to throw in a joke, but it doesn't fit anymore.
And
I was about
think-
to say we should send that granny that Jonas talked about to America and try to.
she's probably already dead.
Should-
But I mean, come on,
She
the war
probably,
came
she
down
probably
ages
was
ago.
in the States and
But I think this applies also to dating, where we're trying to find the best partner for ourselves. Which, at the end of the day, every marriage takes work. Every marriage has to be worked on. Nothing is perfect. So we might try to find the perfect wife, where first of all it doesn't exist, and second of all, it wouldn't make so much of a difference in the end, anyway.
Because problems come along anyway.
Yes. Not to say now that I, for myself, have so many options to choose from.
Come on, Jonas.
Where I would have to make the choice, right? It's a totally different story.
Stop it.
I just want to
But,
add a quick
Sure, go ahead,
point,
Lucas.
which is a one that we learned at least in my advanced development studies class, and that was to do with the problem that China is facing at the moment, right? So globally, for every let me think about this. For every 100 women, there are 105 men. Okay, so there's an overproportionate amount of men for women. In China, it was 100, I believe 111 or 12 men, right? So there are way more men than there are women, right? And that was obviously due to the one-child policy that favored men to women. Well, right now, what's happening is women have more choices, right, when it comes to regards to men. And sometimes they will wait longer, right? Sometimes they don't get married at all, right, because of that empowerment that they may feel. And that was obviously then having a rate, like an effect on like birth rates and so forth. And so it definitely shows not just like in the examples that we've had so far, but also like on a grand scale, what sometimes choice can do when we have too much choice and too much maybe freedom in that area, that it may even cause like problems within countries and not just like societies. Because there's, have you ever heard of Trader Joe's? It's an American store.
Yep.
It's actually, I believe it's owned by Aldi, which is really quite interesting. Their whole marketing is to do, or their idea is to limit the amount of choices that their customers have to make. So everything you buy in there is made by Trader Joe's. They don't have any other like brand. It's all Trader Joe's. And they maybe have like 5 different types of chocolate bars or like 5 different meals. But what they do is every other week or every week, they will change maybe the flavors. But there's always still only 5, you know? And it's interesting how we often say we like to have a variety, but in the end effect, it's kind of like our brains just can't handle it. Because I remember I wanted to buy earphones. I was standing in Saturn, so like an electric, what do you call that in English? Yeah, electronic store, thanks. And I was trying to buy earphones. I stood there for an hour with my sister, looking, and I was like, I only have this much money. I want to buy this, and then that doesn't work. And do you know what happened? I left the store with buying nothing.
Yeah.
You know, and I think going back to the point that I wanted to make with the whole like COVID thing, because if we put ourselves in positions, even physical places, there are only certain things we can do, right? If we're sitting in the bathroom, there's only certain things you can do, right? You go shower, you go use the toilet, you wash your hands, you shave or whatever, right? But you're not gonna exercise. You're not gonna take record a podcast in there, for example. And it makes me think, if we limit like the places we're in, or take like specific places that limit the things we can do there, whether that in effect would make us more better at making decisions or not. I don't know.
I agree.
It's an
Like
idea.
there's this problem of being paralyzed by your choices. So if, for example, if you for example go to Zalando, which is like a clothing store, like an online clothing store, and you just browse thousands of different articles. Like it happened to me all the time. I think I need this item, then I scroll for half an hour, and then I just fed up with it and stop it, right? And it's the same what you said. Like I think sometimes those options just limit us in our, like, they just put us in a position where we just don't want to make a choice at all, and this is very unhealthy, right?
But how do you change that? Like in today's society, where in a way it's kind of forced upon us, right? Because whether it be, well, I don't want to say forced, but it's highly encouraged that we use medias like Amazon, or whether it be Zalando because it's cheaper as a student, or whatsoever, to, yeah, like, how do we you kind of like fight that, like heuristics or whatever? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there are different methods. So one very popular one is just pick randomly. So there are apps we just choose for you, right? So there are apps you just give the app the options, and the app is going to choose for you. And obviously it's random, but you just get rid of the choice, because in the back of our minds we know that it doesn't make any difference, right? It doesn't make a difference if I pick this salami or this salami. It's salami at the end of the day, right? So this is if you just don't want to bother with the choice. And one interesting thing is, which comes from a computer scientific background, is like there's something that's called the optimal stopping problem. So
the secretary problem.
Yes. So
I literally just looked that up.
yeah. So I read this book. It's here. It's called Algorithms to Live By. It's probably mirrored on your screen.
No, it's actually not.
No, it's correct.
So in this book, they basically take a lot of algorithms and apply it to real life. So one of this is the optimal stopping problem, or the so-called secretary problem. And this deals exactly with the problem of having to make a choice without going through all the choices, right? So, for example, in the computer science terms, it would be, for example, if your software has to decide what path it has to take, but there's so many paths that you don't want to check every path, because it takes too much time, and time is obviously cost. So what you want to do is you want to have the highest probability of picking the best path. So the general example is the so-called secretary problem, where you are a CEO of a company and you want to hire a secretary, and you have 100 people who want to take this job, and you have to interview people, and then you have to decide if she's going to get the job or not, right? So the problem is, for you as a CEO, your time is very valuable, and you don't want to interview all 100 applicants. So when is the best point for you to stop looking for the best secretary and just pick one, right? So there's some math behind it, but at the end of the magic number is 37, where you say, okay, I am going to look through 37% of the applicants, and afterwards I choose the next best one. So with our 100 secretaries, for example, I'm now going to interview the first 37 applicants without making a choice, and then I'm going to choose the next best applicant compared to the first 37. And then I have the highest probability of having picked the best applicant in the whole bunch. And this probability is, funny enough, 37%. So I still have the highest probability of having picked the best one. And this way, so for example, in this book, they described a real life example of his friend who used this to actually find his wife. So he said, I want to marry between 20 and 30, right? Between 20 years old to 30 years old. How am I going to do it? So he said, the first 4 years, I am just going to date as much as I can without making a decision. And afterwards, I'm going to marry the next person who's better than all the other girls I dated before. And he said, okay, this would work. The problem is in real life, there's a lot of variables. So for him, it didn't turn out quite right because the girl he picked didn't want to marry him. And actually, another thing is, so in the secretarial problem, you basically discard the first 37. But he, in the marriage example, he picked one he already dated before, right? Which is
second best.
Also fine. But at the end of the day, it's an algorithm where I can say, okay, for example, with phones, if I want to pick the best Android phone, I'm not going to look at every Android phone I can find. I'm just going to look at the limited set and say, after I reviewed all those, I pick the next one who is better than all the others before, right? And you can apply this to many different choices, right? You can say, okay, I don't know, buy yogurt or something, or buy a computer, or like, for example, with universities, it's the same with universities, right? If you say, okay, I want to study, like, I know I want to study computer science, what university are you going to pick, right? So you basically have, I don't know, hundreds of universities in Germany. Which one are you going to choose? So basically, you just take a subset, mix them randomly, make like a example set of which is your baseline, and then you pick the best one following, right? So this helps you kind of make a decision without where you will be sure you made the best decision you could make in your position you're in right now.
Yeah, with the resources that you have given.
Yeah.
If I remember it right, but correct me if I'm wrong, but there's just one thing that I had troubles with the secretary problem, and because there's one rule that needs to be applied for the math to be right, and it's that you cannot go back. You cannot.
Yes, that's
you
right.
cannot pick the fifth one.
So
example.
after you interview the secretary, you have to decide if you hire her or not. You cannot interview her again, right? So this is a limitation, and that's what I said with the marriage guy. He actually married someone he already dated in the past, right? So in real life, it's kind of like more flexible.
Yeah.
So I
But
think
it's still a guideline. Right?
It's a guideline, and we always have to see like what do I have to make a decision on, right? Like, what is it? If it's like a secretary and I have to tell her right after if I take her or not, I think this rule probably applies maybe for picking a wife. There's some parallels, but maybe I should, I don't know, just date. And I guess this guy, he went back to the one he dated, so he made an exception, and it was good for him. And I also love the aspect, the first thing, the first suggestion that Jonas brought up. He was talking about, I guess, flipping a coin, because just 2 weeks ago, no, a month ago, it was like a month ago, I was discussing with a student friend, and we had like 200 questions of different topics, and we said, okay, we're gonna work together, and there's like topic 1, 2, 3, 4 until like 10, and we said, okay, we're just gonna divide it, and who's gonna do like 1 and 3, or like the odds, right, and who's gonna do the evens. And we just came up with this funny idea. We both didn't care, and we just flipped a coin. And we were just both super happy, and we didn't annoy ourselves with like going through questions or blah, blah, blah. And so what I would say, look at what you have, what is the decision you want to take? What is it? And then you have to evaluate like how much time do you want to spend in finding the right decision, and how much math do you want to bring into it, like the 30% rule. And also in this book, I also read this book, and there are also some other rules like this optimal stopping problem, like when should you take the parking place, and there's also algorithms to that. And I think we can learn from that. But yeah, there's also one other factor. I think it's also described in the book. It's experiences that we have that also influence our decisions. But
yeah, I just wanted to say something to the random selection. So I think we all watched some episodes of Big Bang Theory. So there's this one episode where Sheldon has to decide if he's going to buy a PlayStation or an Xbox. And they talked actually a lot about the science behind making this choice, because he couldn't choose. Because, like I said, it's like if the choices are very similar but still so different, it's really hard to make a decision. And there's this trick where you flip a coin, and depending on how you feel seeing the result, you should make a choice, right? So yes, it's you flip a coin. Heads is PlayStation, tails is Xbox, and you say whatever comes up, I'm gonna buy. And if you see the side and you feel happy about it, you should pick it. And if you don't feel happy about it, you obviously should pick the other one.
And I think Sheldon he picked the other one, right?
No, he didn't choose at the end. It's a show.
Oh, okay.
But for example, it would be the same example if I say, okay, I've narrowed it down to two choices. I'm gonna ask Ruben now to make a decision. And if I'm happy about it, then I pick it. If I'm not, I'm picking the other one. Right?
Yeah, and I think that because what you just said literally was what I was thinking about, which is so far we've talked about the very much rational side of decision making. Okay, so I mean, Lucas has written his paper concerning a lot of data. So he used data to make his decision, and you guys obviously in your papers, your theses for your studies, had to base every single argument, hypothesis on data. Whether it be software engineering, electronics, electrical engineering. Lucas did economics and does economics, and I'm doing medical engineering. But that's the thing, is like we're not data driven people. We are very much driven by emotions. I thought there was a really interesting little saying, which is that the emotional tail wags the rational dog.
You might have to explain.
Even though in the sense, like, we think that we're rational. We think that we make very much rational choices. So the majority of us, what we see as us in the mirror, and who we see as our own personality, we think that the choices we make are rational. But in fact, so often the choices we make are not rational. They're based off emotions. They're based off the tail, the tiny little thing at the end of the dog is actually choosing the direction where the dog is going to go towards. And I think that's another factor that is so difficult to calculate into a real life situation. I think it's hilarious. I think it's a super interesting topic. Reducing the decision making down to pure numbers is really interesting, but that's not how we make the decisions. That's maybe how we should make decisions, but that's not how we make decisions. And I just think it's so difficult for us to be, have no biases. We talk about heuristics, and people who don't know what heuristics is, I don't know, Lucas, do you want to explain it?
Yeah, I could, but before we move on to that,
yeah, sure.
You were talking about like the emotional aspect of decision making. I had to think of a personal experience where it was a student job, and I was just employed, and often we're nervous. We don't know who the people are. We're trying to get to know the systems, whether it be the computer or just the role of our jobs. And I realized what I was doing was, like, I understood my role and I understood certain things, but new things would come up and I would try and figure them out by myself. And I was like, well, how long do I spend trying to figure out myself before I ask someone? And if I ask someone, how frustrated are they going to get with me, right? Because for those of you who know me well enough, I'm a very, well, I don't want to say a very anxious person, but I struggle with anxiety and depression, and often what people think of me, and I overthink things, okay? And so this was a constant battle every time I was at work. Like, do I ask my colleague I've already asked? Okay. And then this turmoil and this stress starts to build. And I'd realize that because, I don't know, maybe for you have the same thing. When you get stressed, your shoulders lift at work and you're constantly holding your shoulders. And so by the end of the day, I'd be like, oh, why are my shoulders? And so I went to my therapist and I explained this this frustration I had with not being able to make a decision. Do I ask? Do I not ask? When is it right? And so forth, because so many inputs were coming, right? And that was also one of the struggles with the earphones in the store, trying to figure out which ones to get. And so we came up with an algorithm, right? And so it's interesting that we spoke about algorithms, because I think what may help us is to look at the things that we struggle with, to identify where we are struggling, and to have set rules and to try and keep them, right? Obviously allow for some flexibility, because we are human beings, we feel different. You know, if you talk about diets, for example, you know, things go well until you've had a crappy day, and then ice cream, boom, 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 or chocolate. And so the rule we set was that I would, for 5 minutes, try and figure out myself. And if I couldn't figure it out, I ask. Without like second guessing, I ask, right? And that helped a great deal, you know, to say it's okay to ask, and also to realize that certain options are okay.
Yeah, I think it's very important that we come to a realization what we struggle with, right? What kind of decisions we're going to struggle with. And I think we already see it in society, how society is starting to change, how the people realize that making decisions stresses people out. Everyone is stressed out by making decisions, right? And that through this variety we have, people are stressed out. And so one example, it's very, very, very business-like, but Netflix, for example, they realized people have a hard choice deciding what to watch. Right? Everyone knows it. Everyone sat in front of Netflix for 40 hours trying to decide what movie to watch, right? Everyone had this situation in life. And it stresses people out. And obviously it's bad for Netflix because no one is watching during those 40 minutes, right? So profits are lost. And what is starting to roll out now as a beta version is this random, right? So you have, when you go into, I saw it, so I don't have it on my TV, for example, but on my parents' TV, I just randomly saw it and looked it up. So when you choose your account, underneath it says random playlist or whatever, and you click on it and just play something at random, something that probably matches your viewing behavior, but just play something random, so you don't have to choose, right? It's like, because we are so used from TV, for example, just turn on the TV and zap around and you just have to watch what's coming, right? So Netflix realized people are unhappy making those choices, so they came up with a solution. And it's the same with you. For example, you realize there's a problem in your life where you have a very struggle with making a decision. So you just come up with a general idea on how to solve it. And it's gonna work like 98% of the time. And the other 2% is like, it's fine. So for example, it's much worse, probably for you, it's much worse to beat yourself up all day if you should ask or not. And if you have asked and you would be annoyed, it's probably not as bad as having yourself beaten up all day, right? So I think there's the same kind of mentality here. Even if you come up with an algorithm and it doesn't work, in the long run, it's still better than beating yourself up over it.
I really like that. I really like the whole the idea that, you know, but like Lukas said, I think the key word there is that we identify, you know, our triggers, that we identify the fact that we are emotional. So Lukas and I, we're quite opposites. I'm very extroverted, he's very introverted. He takes a long time to make a decision, whereas I just make a decision. I try and work it out in my head. If it makes sense, I'll just do it. I mean, that's how this podcast kind of started. It was spontaneous. Let's do it. And it's just interesting to hear the process that other people have when they get into this situation of like, okay, I realize that this makes me anxious and the pros and cons, and they weigh this up, and then they create a system. They create a system that will help them in the long run. Maybe, like you said, the 2% will always be there, but in the long run, it will help them to actually make a decision rather than constantly go through Netflix for the rest of their lives. You know, and there's tons of companies out there that do that, whether it be with meal plans, you know, the HelloFresh. I mean, they're more than welcome to sponsor us, but you know, you know, you get your meals pretty much set. You can pick, you know, but that you get told this is what you have to pick from. Choose. and then it gets sent to you, and that's what you have to eat, pretty much. I mean, you can eat whatever you buy in the supermarket, but you paid for it. But I think it's just interesting that we, as human beings, are so different, but yet in something so similar. Because if we go back to the dating, these two, and they're on my right hand side, these two have already made their choice, and they found a system that worked for them. I haven't found the system that works for me yet. And people might say, oh, you haven't found the right person, and maybe you're in the wrong time of your life, and there's so many factors, and the stars are not aligned, and the chakras are not, whatever. But I just haven't found my system for making a decision concerning dating. And maybe I need to figure that out. I don't know.
Just pick the next one, Marcus. Do it. We'll be witnesses.
Okay, the next person I date, I'll just marry.
Yeah,
So,
just
ladies,
random,
I will send around
in the
link.
comments.
If we get
just put a
1,000
random
likes,
selector on your match, right? So in your Tinder matches, just pick one randomly and just say, let's marry,
Yeah.
and then you have to report.
If this video gets 1,000 likes, then the person who has done the 1,000th like, I will marry. I mean,
Alright, I make sure it's my dog.
I have to say I'm heterosexual. So that I have to say that.
We have to limit the choices, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've just limited it down. Yeah.
You can't be picky, man. Come on. No, but this actually comes to a very interesting point. So, something you said very interested me. So, the question now is making no decision worse than making a suboptimal decision? So, for example, this is now with dating, especially in our culture. So, for those who don't know, in our culture, religious culture, it's very, let's say, frowned upon to be 30 and not married. So it's very strange. Let's say people look at you strange because they think something is wrong with you if this doesn't happen, right? So there's a certain amount of pressure. So the question now arises: is it better just to marry anyone, or not marry at all, right? Or is it better to? So, for example, for Lukas was the decision: is it better to just not buy headphones at all than to buy a headphone which is not the best headphone? To make it like a more real example, right?
Yeah. Well, I guess in that case, and I think it depends on the person, right? So for me, I would have rather kept my money than to spend it on something that was suboptimal, right? But that's the thing. It's like when you look at economics, you look at utility, right? You look at what gives you the most, let's call it enjoyment, right? Or peace of mind. And that equation is different. Those preferences are different for everyone, right? So I value, in that sense, money more than like suboptimal things. I want to look for things I'll be happy with rather than things I won't be, right? But some people may say 50 euros isn't much. Let's say Marcus, right? He loves to spend money. So he's like, I'll give it a shot. Don't really care that much. And if they're not great, that's okay. But if my standard is higher, then I think then it's difficult.
I think there's only like two things that can come out of that, right? I mean, either it's good or it's bad, and I can only see like a future when you made that, like when you said, okay, I'm 29, I should marry someone, and you just pick someone. I can only see like a 70-year-old guy saying either of two things. Either he's gonna tell his wife, like when she asked him why did you marry me, and he just said, well, I just picked the suboptimal, or how you say that.
Second choice.
I just took a choice. You're just my choice, right? But the other thing that might as well also happen, that in those 50 years you figured out how to be a married man and how to appreciate your marriage. I don't know, and it's only possible, I guess, if you're if what you called suboptimal what's this word?
Optimal, yeah.
Optimal before, turned out to be not so suboptimal. Like it would be those headphones that you just bought and you start to be satisfied.
Yeah, or you're annoyed for the rest of your life.
Or you're annoyed for the rest of it. That's when you when the headphone asks, "Why did you pick me?" And you're just like, "I just flipped a coin."
No, but
to be
for
honest.
example, you bought these headphones which you didn't care much to make an educated decision on, right? You just choose whatever. You just picked one. And this is one thing that annoys you about this headphone for ages. And you just say, well, but I spent the money and I don't want to return them. So now I have to live with this. And you live with this bug in your headphones, which just annoys you. And it kind of ties in with what we talked about in the beginning about, well, you can always return it and pick another one. But with, for example, with marriage, what we discussed in the beginning is it's okay to switch wives, right? Is it okay to just switch your university degrees? Is it okay to just switch your jobs because you didn't spend enough time on making the right choice? But at the same time, it's not the question what I ask. Is it better to not make any decision at all or make a suboptimal choice? So, for example, for us, Marcus and me, is it better to continue living for 10 years alone or to just marry, let's say, I don't want to say just marry anyone, but marry the next person that comes along and wants to date you, right?
I'm buying a dog.
Yeah, obviously.
Well,
but this doesn't answer the question, you know?
I'm not marrying the dog.
Yeah, well, the thing is, do you want like a specific answer? Because I think it's a very complicated one, right? Because I know like Marcus, he seems to be okay being by himself, right? I don't believe that would be the case maybe after 10 years, you know, like when he maybe sees me having kids, you know. I think there are things that change and things that, you know, I think that's the essence. And I think that might also be the difference between saying, oh, I can get new headphones and a new wife, is the fact that your first wife has the capacity to change, has the capacity to be different and to maybe learn new things, the same as you know, as a husband, you may change. You found the perfect woman, but you're the butthole, you know. Whereas like with headphones, like these stay the form that they are. They may die, you know.
That's
obviously
true.
the battery may die, but you know, maybe it'd be better to compare some kind of device that changes just like human beings do, to be able to compare the difference, right?
I kind of agree, but at the same time, we know that the older you get, the less you're likely to change, right? So
You become more stubborn, yeah.
Right, so
you get more set in your way, right? Yeah.
I probably, if I Google now, I can find some studies that show that the older you get, the harder it is to change, right?
Mm-hmm.
All dogs don't learn new tricks, right? We all heard the saying. So what I maybe from your economic background, it's actually at the end of the day, it's kind of a risk analysis, right?
Yeah.
So do I risk being unhappy for a certain amount of time, or do I risk being unhappy and not marrying at all? So what is the risk? And is there a way to make, like, put some kind of numbers behind your decision in terms of risk analysis, right? If you say, okay, with this percentage amount of risk, I take it or not. Or is it just a business requirement?
Go ahead, Ruben, before I say something.
It's just a feeling that I have. Like we have like this vibe right now of like super not emotional. What's the opposite of emotional? But like super rational analysis. And I feel right now to really dig deeper into this topic, we would need a woman here. Like we would need some form of emotions here, because right now it's just like, it just became into this. Well, if
you have to quantify dating with equations, you know, I'm sure there are ways, and I'm sure that people have like found ways to quantify it. I just think like human beings are just so complicated that I think that's very difficult, because you always like. You think you've always seen everything that humans can do, and then you go on YouTube and you type in "people are awesome," and you're like, "What? How did they just do like 15 backflips in the space of 5 seconds?"
It's video editing, man.
Yeah, or that.
Fake news.
But there's always like specific people that amaze you. you know, and you think you can't be more amazed, and then you meet someone else. And maybe I'm just talking it positive, right? You know, because sometimes it's not as easy as that. And, you know, at least with my wife, I feel like I've been very lucky. I might have to say that because she may listen to this, don't know, but yeah.
I think yeah, like there's this joke. I probably can't tell it right, but it kind of ties into what you guys said, especially what Room said about that we are too rational about it. So there's this guy, this physicist, who's going to this cafe every day to drink his coffee, but he's always ordering 2 cups, right? And he only drinks one, so he puts one in front of him and one in front of the empty seat in front of him, right? And after a couple of weeks, like the server, she asked like, so what's your deal? Like, what are you doing? And he said like, well, in the quantum physics, we believe that it is possible that there's the perfect woman materializing in front of me, and I'm gonna drink coffee with her. And like she said, well, couldn't you just go out and date someone? And he said, well, it's actually more likely that someone is going to materialize in front of you. Right? So it's kind of like, you know, we are probably like Lukas are right that we like Room as well, that first of all we're too rational, and second of all we're probably too pessimistic about the whole situation. That Lukas is probably right, that at the end of the day not much you can do anyway, right? If you want to be happy, you just have to go out there, try your luck with any decision you make, right? At the end of the day, you have to just go and do something, than not do anything at all, right? And just hope for the best.
And I think
because
there's
it's not as bad.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Is because it's probably not as bad most of the time as we think it's going to be, right?
And I think there's not just this black and white, and I must admit I find myself in this kind of like completely all in or all out. Like I often see that, like, oh, I've eaten like a piece of the chocolate, I've eaten some, so I might as well eat all of it. Like for me, there's like all or nothing, and that would be the scenario of finding someone that you'd be unhappy with for the rest of your life, or not dating anyone at all. But there is so much in between, right? Obviously like courtship, like dating, as well as marriage, but then also like people. And I think if you keep, and it's now turned somewhat into like relationship stuff, but like
it's still decision making.
Well, yeah, it is because, and I think that maybe is like the interesting thing about when emotions, especially love, and trying to find like your soulmate, or however you want to define it, is the fact that you have to somewhat be rational about it, because you know there are things that are going to bug you, right? Or there are things that she knows are going to bug her about you, right? But then there's also the aspect of love that can't be quite quantified, you know. Because let's use the simple example of making food. For me, right, I like to eat, great, but it's like not the most important thing to me whether you make a fried egg or you make me like this awesome club sandwich with I just like to eat, right? However, maybe for
I cooked for you for 3 years.
Shut up.
And
for your wife, there may be a huge difference, right? So the one way that you show love is definitely received differently, and so you can't measure one for one. And I think that might be the tricky thing, is when you're looking for someone to say, she's missing this, yeah, but how does that measure up to the thing that you're missing? You know, and it's always different in everybody's like equation, because I think, you know, we might think in equations, but, yeah.
And I think we've come to the point. I mean, we've I think definitely done an hour now. And Ruben, am I correct in assuming this?
Yes. Well,
over an hour.
Well over an hour.
Well over an hour. And I think, you know, we'll wrap it up. And firstly, I want to thank Lukas for coming on and bringing his insights into relationship advice, I guess. But thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it, and hopefully we'll have you on again in the future.
Cheers for having me.
And so yeah, and I want to grab just in closing is what Lucas said, is that it's not black and white, it's not one or the other. There's a journey in between, and it's in our German version of our last podcast, of our last episode, we talked about what does it mean to have a vision, what does it mean to have a goal, and we talked about how that something has to bring us joy, right? And sometimes, maybe let's say our goal is to get married, right? Let's say I'm talking about me and I want to get married. Well, I don't want to, wait so long and be so sad the entire time until I finally magically reach this goal. No, I want to be able to enjoy the process and the journey that goes to this goal. And part of that does mean becoming vulnerable. I don't like making myself vulnerable. My family can attest to that 100%, and all my ex-girlfriends as well. Please don't troll us in the comments.
Myriad of ex-girlfriends, the hundreds, legion.
But I have to make myself vulnerable, and you mentioned risk analysis. I have to accept the risk, and sometimes they're higher, sometimes they're lower, depending on the situation and person. But if I don't take the risk, if I don't allow myself to be vulnerable, then I will never know. I will always have the question in my mind, what if? And I think that is probably the worst. And there's a beautiful poem I can't quote, but there's a beautiful poem that says that the saddest words in pen and tongue, I think, is the words that it could have been. What if? And so I think also that's my personal views, that just try it. And Jonas, you said it as well. Just screw it. Just do it. Flip a coin. Are you going to go on a date with this girl? Yes or no? Flip it. Just do it.
And just do it the best that you can. I think is a good thing, because I think sometimes we compare, right? We've been talking about decisions just real quick, and we're talking about like having to make the optimal decision. The fact is, I don't think I've made an optimal decision apart from getting married to my wife, in my life, but they've been a decision nonetheless, and you have to kind of accept that and just be okay with.
You have to accept the consequences. And yeah, absolutely. So thanks for listening, and please do remember that this podcast is now available not just on YouTube. Please subscribe to our channel if you've enjoyed it. Please leave a like, and if you've got any input for us, any comments, any topics that you would like us to talk about in the future, and if you want to be part of this show next time, especially as Ruhm said, it'd be great to have a female voice bringing up the emotional side rather than the constant rational. And so please leave a comment in the comment section, and our podcast is now available on Spotify and on Google Podcast, and hopefully soon on iTunes too. So thanks for listening, and I guess we're none the wiser.
I don't know if you saw, but I got like so tired. I stopped listening. I stopped doing. I tried to laugh whenever Marcus laughed. I was like, I was not listening and following the topic at all.